Good morning and welcome to the Los Angeles Unified School District Mental Health Evaluation Team training here at the NAMI conference in 2020. My name is Nicole McMahon and I'm the specialist with the Mental Health Evaluation Team, and today I'm joined by my partner, Officer Serrato. And we wanted to give you a little glimpse into what LA Unified School District is doing to support student safety and to address mental health concerns with our students. So our objectives for today is to enhance your knowledge about the Welfare and Institutions Code 5585 and consumer rights, to inform you about how LAUSD uses collaboration to support students experiencing a mental health crisis, and to discuss continuity of care for students in the aftermath of a MHET evaluation. So our mission statement as MHET is to provide compassionate field intervention, triage, and appropriate linkages and services in situations involving students and staff dealing with or suffering from a mental health crisis. What does the response look like? The response is a collaboration between a school police officer, LA school police officer, in collaboration with the mental health practitioners. All our mental health practitioners are MSWs, and the majority, 90% of them, carry an LSCSW, a licensed clinical social work credential. The teams are deployed in rotating deployment, which means that if we have a team that went out yesterday or came home yesterday, they'll be the first team to go out the next day. On most of the days, we have at least 6 mental health evaluation team MET units in the field handling all areas. So we don't separate them by areas. They're district-wide and they support all the students and staff throughout the district. Another component is our officers ride in, this is pretty much a car similar to what they ride in an unmarked car, and the officers are dressed in a black polo shirt with a khaki bottoms, in which it allows them to have a bit of a softer uniform than traditional police uniform. MET is also considered co-responders, and what that means is we actually respond after the situation has been stabilized. So if there's a safety concern, of course, the safety concern is addressed by the uniformed personnel first, uniformed officers first, and then we come in as a tandem co-responders to support the mental health needs. There are a lot of occasions where we may be the first responder in the sense that the student is calm, student is in the office and things are stabilized, then we don't have a problem being the first responder to the scene. So how did MET kind of come to an existence? In March 2018, after the tragic shooting down in Florida, the Parkland shooting, the board came together and they asked for a board resolution. And the board resolution was safeguarding our schools, demanding common sense gun laws, and best practices to protect our students and staff. So shortly after that, it was a discussion about how can we collaborate together, mental health, along with law enforcement, to make sure that we are safeguarding and protecting our schools. Thus came the mental health evaluation team, and we launched in August of 2018 at the beginning of the school year. We started hiring throughout that summer, but we actually officially started working and responding to calls in August 2018. So why MET? As we look at the numbers and we look at the calls for service from school police, and that's the number of calls that school police gets in response to support needed, what we find are a few things. We find that over the years, our first year, we had 922 calls for service for a combination 5585. And for those who don't know, a 5585 is a minor, someone under the age of 18 who's experiencing a mental health crisis. And then we have 5150 are adults who are experiencing a mental health crisis. So a combination of those, 2017, 2018 were 922. In 2018, 2019, there were 1,882. And then 2019, 2020 school year, there were 1,371. And it's important to recognize that that number was up until March 13th, when our school district due to COVID-19, no longer our students were no longer in school. So our numbers dropped significantly. We have what's called an ISTAR system in LAUSD, and ISTAR stands for Incident System Tracking Accountability Report. And that's where we document any concerning behaviors, and what ends up happening is that's where suicidal behaviors. What we found is that last school year, there was a change in it dropped about 3,000 in ISTAR reporting numbers. As a result, really, we believe that as a result of the school year kind of being abruptly put into a halt. But based on the numbers, you can see that we were 500 calls away from matching that of the year before. So that's something that we know that the numbers are increasing. Right now, it's difficult to count, simply in the sense that with students not being in, we're not responding to as many calls, but we're still going out to homes as needed, as recognized by parents and teachers through the virtual world. And the average in 2017, 2018 is about an average of 8 calls per day. As I mentioned before, those numbers have dropped simply because the students aren't actually in school. So it's less opportunities for school staff to recognize a student in distress. Part of what we do as MHET is really we follow up and we provide an opportunity to have continuity of care in the aftermath of a 72-hour hold, as well as to assist with the reentry when students are transported and taken on a 72-hour hold. What does that reentry plan look like? What does safety plan look like? And then if their student happens to be homicidal or a danger to others, what does the threat assessment management meetings look like afterwards? How do we make sure that we secure not only that student's safety, but the safety of others as well?
Hi, good everyone. My name is Antonio Serrato. I've been a part of MHET for the last 2 years. And what I'm going to be presenting on is the actual code described in the Welfare and Institutions Code, 5585. This code defines what you need and what needs to be done when a minor poses a danger to himself, danger to others, or is gravely disabled. Now, being a school police officer, the people that we service the most are minors, right? We're assigned to schools and we come into contact with them all the time. Our officers in the academy usually get a fine description of what the 5150 code is, which is the adults. But a lot of our officers and even municipal officers are very confused when it comes to minors. So being part of MHET for the past 2 years, I was privileged to a lot more information about dealing with the mentally ill, especially minors. And as a good officer, what we did was we created a presentation to better inform our officers out in the field when responding to these calls. So the next few slides are the actual presentation that we present to our officers at school police. First slide is the definition of 5585, which is when a minor poses a danger to himself, to others, or is gravely disabled, and the authorization for voluntary treatment is not available. A peace officer or member of the attending staff as defined by regulation of an evaluation facility designated by the county or other professional person designated by the county may, upon probable cause, take or cause to be taken the minor into custody and place him or her in a facility designated by the county and approved by the State Department of Health Care Services as a facility for 72-hour treatment and evaluation of minors. The facility shall make every effort to notify the minor's parent or legal guardian as soon as possible as the minor is detained. So what we mean by that is if we're interviewing a minor and we discover that he or she poses a danger to himself, what I mean by that is they describe to us an incident where they're going to harm themselves or they're going to harm somebody else, right? They qualify for this particular 72-hour hold as long as there's no voluntary treatment available. What I mean by that, the voluntary treatment is on certain occasions, right? I've interviewed children. They do, in my mind, meet all the criteria for a 72-hour hold. And when I describe this to their parents don't believe me, or they mistrust me and disregard what I'm telling them or what my partner is telling them. A voluntary treatment is not an option. The parents are not going to be taking them to a facility because they just are dismissive of anything we're saying. In this particular case, they do meet the criteria for 72-hour hold because they've already described their plan, intent, and means to harm themselves, and a voluntary option doesn't exist, right? So I'm going to touch a little bit more on gravely disabled. Um, Gravely disabled is something that confuses a lot of people just because they don't understand it, especially when it comes to minors. We had a situation a couple years ago where we went ahead and transported somebody for gravely disabled. It was a minor. We went to do a home visit. The child was sleeping in his bed and had not gotten out of bed for several days. He hadn't eaten, and nor had he had showered. Um, Now, this is regardless of being provided with these facilities. He had access to a shower, he had access to food, but did not want to do it. He just didn't want to take a shower. He didn't want to eat. He just wanted to lie there. In this particular case, we went ahead and transported him for gravely disabled because if he continued with that behavior, he would have severely harmed himself. Next slide, please. So this B code, the 5585.5 parentheses B, talks about third-party info. The highlighted portion on the bottom, if the probable cause is based on statement of a person other than the officer, member of the attending staff, or professional person, the person shall be liable in a civil action for intentionally giving a statement which he or she knows to be false. So we've had particular incidences where we go out and we try and talk to a child, but they're just non-responsive. What I mean by that is they don't want to talk to me. They don't want to talk to my civilian partner, right? Either because they fear any action that's going to be taken after that, or they just don't like the police, or they don't like social workers. But so if they had made contact with somebody prior to us arriving, such as a principal, such as a social worker there on campus, the school psychologist, we can transport this minor on third-party info. So the hold gives us that option, but we'd have to get the statements from that principal or from that social worker to add on to our hold. And anything that they tell us must be true, right? They can't try and fluff the situation with added info. It all needs to be accurate. It all needs to coincide with what the minor told them, and they need to relay that over to us, so that way we can relay it over to the doctor. So that's very important because they can be civilly liable if they lie to us. Next slide, please. All right, so our initial response when going out to these calls is first we gather background information. When we do get a call to go out to a school or to a home, what I do on my end is I go ahead and call the responding officers. So we are co-responders. So a uniformed officer is usually the first one to get to the scene. I will make contact with them and say, okay, can you tell me a little bit about what you have? What's the history? What's the child saying? What's the social worker on scene saying? How do you guys feel about this? Do I need a translator? Something like that. And also, we have additional services for our officers out in the field, just in case they don't need MHET. Our officers are well informed, right? But sometimes they need to bounce some questions off of us. Hey, this is going on with the child, but I'm not sure if you guys need to come, right? We'll welcome those types of questions. Why? Because it makes everybody more comfortable with the decision that they're making out in the field. If they do need translation services, we are able to provide them with the LAUSD number to get those translation services, and also the determination to cuff. What's great about our particular department right now is our concerned response is making us more comfortable with not cuffing these individuals out in the field, right? We want to let them know, yes, these people are in your custody, but they're not criminals. they're people in crisis, and that's the way we want our officers to go out and come into contact with them with a concerned response of caring about their welfare. Next slide, please. Okay, so rapport building. Um, this is more of like verbiage we like to see our officers go out and and the language they use with the people they come into contact with. We give a particular set of ways of how to build rapport and how to build rapport quickly. One is asking how are you doing today, right? Did you eat today? Um, did anything happen today that is different from any other day, right? We ask them to have a calm demeanor, right, and also to mirror their images, which we'll talk about in a bit. We provide reassurances, telling them that, look, you're not in trouble. Nothing you tell me is going to get you in trouble. I'm here because I care, and I want to make sure that you go home safely tonight. We ask that our officers be honest. Never lie to the people that you come into contact with out in the field. Why? Because they can see that. They can see that you genuinely don't care, right? So we ask, look, be honest with them. Be non-judgmental, and don't make any promises, right? Just let them know you're there to help. Next slide. So active listening. It requires the listener to fully concentrate and understand and respond to what's being said to them. What I mean by that is when you're actively listening to someone, they'll tell you something. Well, today wasn't a good day. What I usually say after that is, oh, today wasn't a good day. I repeat what they say. Why? Because it lets them know, hey, I just heard what you said, right? And I want to know more about what's going on. Some of the keys to active listening is demonstrate concern by paying attention, paraphrase to show understanding, use nonverbal cues such as nodding, eye contact, and leaning forward, provide brief verbal affirmations such as I see, it sounds like, and thank you for sharing that. You want to make sure that you have open-ended questions. That are designed to encourage a full, meaningful answer. Cannot be answered with a yes or no, but with specific, detailed information. Closed-ended questions encourage a short or single word answer. Next slide, please. So paraphrasing. It shows you understand what is being said well enough to state it in your own words. Helps the person feel heard and understood. I'm listening. I care about what you're saying. I'm doing my best to understand what you are going through, right? It lets them know that, hey, you are listening and you do care. It's just further understanding the verbiage that you're using that gets someone to understand you. Next slide. Okay, so this is something that I use all the time. And when I heard about it, I understood it more when I used it out in the field, right? It's mirroring and reflecting. So in front of you, you see my sergeant off to the right, and he's sitting next to an adult female that he came into contact with out in the field. It's mirror imaging, right? She's sitting in a particular way. He sat next to her in the same way. Why? Because we find that when we do this, someone is more likely to feel comfortable with you and more likely to open up and give you the answers that you need to these particular questions that you're asking. So if a child is sitting across from you, right, you sit across from them and mirror their images. If they have their hands placed on their knees, you put your hands placed on your knees. If they're crossing their legs, you cross your legs in the same particular way that they have their legs crossed. So plan, intent, and means, right? This is something great that we began using and began using it as a definition for officers to make a determination on whether they need to take someone on a 5585 hold. So intent, right? Does the child intend to harm someone or to harm themselves, right? How do we find this out? Well, ask, right? What are you gonna do today? I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna hurt myself. Well, how do you mean hurt yourself, right? Go through the plan with them. Well, how do you mean hurt yourself? Well, I plan on committing suicide today, right? Okay, how are you gonna do that? Then start talking about the means. How are you going to commit suicide today? Well, I'm going to go home and I'm going to ... right? It's important to have a understanding of their intent of what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they're going to get it done. Sometimes the means that they express is going to be non-obtainable, right? If they said that they want to gain a certain item and then commit an act of suicide, if they have no access to that particular item, it lessens somewhat of the threat that they're making. Next slide, please. So Nicole is going to talk about what happens after MHET response.
So once we've made a determination in terms of the mental health evaluation team is determined, or the officers in the field have determined that, you know what, the student either needs to go or doesn't need to go. What ends up happening is if a student is transported, then what we do is we primarily focus on the reentry meeting. And what we do with that is we support the school site in determining what is needed to support student when they come back to school, in addition to support the family and student into being able to identify those things. Whether it be like a change in classes, a schedule change, modifications to the schedule, lockers, pick up, drop off, to figure out what the stressors are and how to support. And that includes safety planning. In the moment that someone is actively suicidal and thinking of suicide or has made an attempt, safety planning kind of goes on the back burner at that point. But if we do not transport, we for sure make sure that we safety plan and support with linking that student to services, in addition to safety planning both at home and school. And to do this, we work in collaboration with various other departments in the district. It may be special education. It may be the agencies that are working at the school. So if we have a school that has a contracted agency at the school site, it may be a referral to that agency, because maybe the student wouldn't be able to access mental health services if they weren't there on campus. And that's a part of that collaboration that takes place in the response to, in the aftermath of a MHET response. And then most importantly, where do we go from here? One thing that's important is we want to continue training for the mental health evaluation team members, in addition to those who are not members. We want to make sure that the LA School Police Department is still being supported. We also want to make sure that as MHET, we're staying up to date on any resources in the community that can help support. So whether it be victims of crimes, many of our students have been victims and their families have been victims of crime that have led to their thoughts of suicide. It may be that the student has disabilities, and it may be a linkage to regional center or various different resources. And then of course, commercially sexual exploitation of children. We wanna make sure that our students that are high risk, and if we're doing the assessment, we hear some key things. Of course, we do our child abuse reporting, but to also make sure that we are staying abreast on what signs there are to say that somebody might be a CSEC victim or be a target. In addition to that, we go out and do a lot of training for LAUSD staff and community partners to make sure that they have access and they are aware of mental health evaluation team, on what we do, what resources are available. We've done over 100 trainings to over 3,000 different individuals. So we go from community partners, those partners that are in our schools, and let them know, because our services are available to them because they're working with our students. As long as the kids are at school, or at home. As Serato said, we actually focus on training the patrol officers because we recognize that MET can't be everywhere all the time. And we want to make sure that our officers are supported, our officers have what they need. And then in addition to that, we also make sure that we enhance our relationships with the local mental health emergency responders. So down here in Los Angeles, it's the Department of Mental Health. And so we want to make sure that we keep in contact with them and make sure that we are working in collaboration where needed. And then in the hospitals as well. So we wanted to provide this opportunity today for you all to see kind of what the future of police work and collaboration can look like when working collaboratively with mental health professionals, particularly in a school setting. And then lastly, are there any questions? Wanted to give you now an opportunity for us to review the Q&A and answer any questions you may have.